Hey, Steve Mignani here doing the junkyard crawl at Bernardston Auto Wrecking in Bernardston, Massachusetts with the remains of a Studebaker truck. Now we have to remember that Studebaker was founded in 1852 and was one of the world's largest manufacturers of non-powered wheeled vehicles. In fact, until about 1908, when Studebaker made its first trucks, they were well known for buggies, carriages, and even the Conestoga wagon, upon which a lot of Americans went west in the gold rush period of the 1840s, 50s, 60s. So Studebaker was making non-powered vehicles, but by the time this 1950 truck was built, Studebaker was just about 98 years in the business, and it would last through 66. But with that said, this is an interesting truck. Now, the split windshield on this one tells us it's definitely a 1954 or before. They went to a one-piece windshield for 55. And again, this is an R-Series truck, which were made between 1949 and 1960. But something seen only on 49 through 54s is this. This is a hood ornament that is very much like what was used on the Studebaker Champion passenger car, kind of a missile going through an orifice, paging Dr. Freud, paging Dr. Freud. But that was standard stuff up till 1954 on Studebaker trucks. Now, the same basic cab with a one-piece windshield, and again, by the way, styled by Robert Bork and Raymond Loewy at Raymond Loewy Associates. So the same team was responsible for this as was the Starline Coupe, the Champion coming or going Studebaker, which we've seen earlier this week in our videos. But the same basic design team with rounded shapes, curves. But as you get into the late 50s, Studebaker had to facelift this thing, and believe it or not, this is a fiberglass facelift panel that was used on like 56 up Studebaker trucks to give them a more modern look. Crazy but true. Some say Corvette was first with fiberglass. Well, it was kind of a big deal in the industry, and even Studebaker trucks utilized a fiberglass fascia to give the old bones a new look. The world wasn't fooled, but Studebaker tried. And again, being located in West Bend or South Bend, Indiana, the Studebaker company was much smaller than the big three. It was one of the independents. They tried. They gave it a whirl. Let's open the hood on this thing and see what we can discover. Is that engine still there? Okay, yeah, there it is, the Flathead 6. Now, Studebaker would finally have a V8 in 1951, the 232, but it wasn't available in trucks until I think 1955. So with that said, this is the Flathead 6 seen in all Studebaker trucks really until 1955 or so, when the 232 and 259 were finally made available in trucks. Now what we see here is the heavy duty oil bath air cleaner. The point of that is that a truck like this is a dump truck, we'll get to that in a minute, would have seen a lot of duty potentially in a dusty environment, a sand pit, who knows. A paper filter would probably get clogged pretty quick. Meanwhile, the oil bath would be a lot better at keeping the big stuff out for a much longer time and not getting clogged, because you can't get clogged. But again, it's not so good at really fine dust, but with that said, not a bad thing for what it was meant to do. The Flathead, of course, the beauty of these is accessibility of the spark plugs. They're right here. There's no rocker arms, there's no push rods, none of that stuff. The valves are in the block facing up. It's rudimentary, very basic. These will run all day long with no problems. The radiator is big, but notice this. It's mounted on a spring right down here. You can see where the radiator sort of can shake and move and stuff. Meanwhile, the spring prevents the delicate core from getting shocked and potentially separating. Something you find on trucks because, again, they bounce around. They have stiff suspension. The front is a leaf spring arrangement with a solid axle. No independent front suspension here. So, making the truck shake-proof was achieved partly with that spring-mounted radiator. Something you see right here is a Studebaker accessory heater. And the Studebaker S, a very pretty design. And again, Raymond Loewy responsible for that stylized S, which was the Studebaker logo. This is something that would have been sold as a dealer add-on or potentially a factory item, but not standard. You paid extra for that. Let's head down this way here. And again, here is the lever style shock absorber. Look at this. Kind of weird. Inside of this is pistons. And believe it or not, you can actually turn the ends of these things for access to rebuild it. And then this rod here is connected to that to help quell, jounce, and rebound. And again, this one here has split rims. The beauty of these is the simplicity. The danger of these, if you don't have them set just right, these can come apart when you're inflating them. And at 100 psi, not that you want to go that high, you would have 40,000 psi of pressure. If that separates, you're going through the roof. And these were outlawed in the mid 70s on new trucks, so you can still use them. Just make sure you have the right stuff. The problem with split rims, I think there are 3 or 4 different basic designs, and if you mix parts, they might look good, but they don't go together well, and they can come apart. Now inside this thing, the cab is, again, the Robert Bork Raymond Loewy. If you look at the rear window, it looks like it's been chopped. Look how small that is. It looks custom, like it's a chopped roof, but this is standard stuff. Great looking cab, really very modern for its time. Again, new in 1949, the R series 49 through 60, but inside we can see the rest of that Studebaker heater assembly. Looks kind of add-on, because it is, but it says Studebaker Climate, whatever that says, but that's a dealer installed or an accessory, not always baked into the vehicle, an option. Here is the map light here, kind of cool little device, would help you to read the instructions to where you're going. Master cylinder under the floorboards right here for the brakes. And speaking of brakes, the parking brake on the end of the transmission, that's a contracting style drum, if you will. Those shoes squeeze down when you pull the lever, and that locks the drive shaft in place. And again, body on frame, of course, construction, as all heavy trucks are and were. The fuel filler here in the side of the cab. Sometimes a rubber plug fills that when the auxiliary side saddle tanks were specified. Now this one was a dump truck. You can see the frame, the remains of the dump frame right here. Kind of niche. This is a dually, probably a 5-tonner, I guess. And notice here that this has massive drums on the back. And the dually, of course, is an adapter right here, which allows the 2 wheels to live on the same wheel stud, or actually dual studs. There you go. There's 2 sets of studs, an inner and an outer. And you can see right here, this is one of the studs for the outboard set of wheels right there. So interesting little peek behind the scenes that you don't usually get to see. 2-stage leaf springs. You can see the springs right here. There's a gap of air without a load on it. This top spring is just sort of long for the ride. You put a load in the back of this thing, and then these finally compress to the point where they make contact and double the capacity of that spring pack. Kind of cool truck stuff. Nothing new, but often hidden under the dump body. 2-speed rear axle. This is probably a Timken. And yeah, well, anyway, but you can see right here the little pod right here that allows this to go from drive to overdrive. And the beauty of this here is you can crawl around with your 6:17 ratio in the sand pit, and then once you have to take that load of sand to the depot, whatever it is on a road, hit that switch and you got maybe a 4:1 ratio, which saves fuel, saves the engine, and allows you to go 45 miles an hour instead of 20 miles an hour. And this dump body is pretty rudimentary, but this is not homemade. In fact, we look here, we can see, yeah, the Garwood logo. And Garwood right there, named after Garfield Wood, a Michigan industrialist who has lived between 1880 and 1971. And one of his primary things, one of many, was making dump bodies, tow truck bodies, commercial bodies, things like that. But if you ever get into power boats and pleasure boats, if you've heard of a Garwood, they're kind of the Rolls Royce of boats. They're made of wood, truly, and they were available, the Garwood boats, up till 1945, 46 or so when fiberglass took over. But Garwood boats were the last word in boats, and same guy, Garwood, Garfield Wood, Garwood boats. And some of those Garwood boats had surplus World War I V12 Liberty engines in them. They were hot rod boats. So Garwood boats and Garwood dump bodies, one of the same. So that's a story of the R Series Studebaker truck, 1949 through 60. Minimal changes, including a fiberglass facelift toward the end, go figure. And of course, Garwood, maker of the dump body on this. One final thing we see on this is kind of cool, is how this thing runs. This here is a drive shaft, kind of an interesting little look-see. And there's a power takeoff. The drive shaft's gone, but down here on the back of the transmission, there's going to be a drive shaft that would come up from here. You'd put the thing in gear in the transmission. That would spin, turning this drive shaft at a very high speed, which would then build hydraulic pressure to pressurize and lift the dump body. And again, Garwood was one of the pioneers in hydraulic lifts for dump trucks. Before that, there were all kinds of Rube Goldberg chain devices, winches, lifts, and even like, telescoping setups that were mechanical. But again, hydraulics really still in use to this very day. Now, if you like this video, be sure to subscribe to the Steve Maggs YouTube channel, share this video with your friends, give us a thumbs up, and by all means, hit the bell so you're aware of the next video, which comes out tomorrow morning.